Okay, we're recording, and it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to tell the damn story. I'm
Damn
Brian,
story.
indie writer, traditional writer. I just sold a Bigfoot story. And with me, it's true, just happened this morning. And with me is the one and only, the legendary Alex Simmons. Hello, Alex Simmons. How are you, sir?
Chris Ryan, I am fine. I'm happy to be here. I'm alive. I'm breathing. Intaking air is such a healthy thing for staying alive, and that's a good thing. And I try and do that every day. And I'm glad to see you, Chris, you independent soul, you wonderful soul, you. I am privileged, though, to be in a position to put two of my favorite people on the same show. It's great. My co-host, Chris Ryan, and my very good friend and a man I've respected for a long time, actor, writer, director, superstar, Mr. Kevin Grievioux. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Alex. Thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
We're really excited that you're here, Kevin.
Right, for you folks who don't know, and there's only like maybe 3 or 4 people on the planet who don't know, Kevin is a multi-talented individual, and we're going to cover so much in this episode. But Kevin has been a film actor for a number of years. We won't say how many. And in pursuing that film acting career, he started writing in film. Some of the writing of film also got intertwined with him writing comics. So he's written and created characters for Marvel. He's written and created a film character. As a matter of fact, it became a trilogy series, but that's something else we're going to talk about, a film series. So that's something else. And he's also now a film director and has, 1 or 2 films under your belt in that respect?
1 film under my belt, some others
in development. So we're going to cover so much of the material that Kevin has dealt with, and of course, all of it approaching about the quality of serving the story, telling a good story, and also reflecting the world in which we live. Let's get to it. Oh.
All right. Kevin, if you don't mind, I want to start with your education. First of all, we were talking before the show, and you were talking about the roots, right? Your really early loves. And you say, man, when you were 6, you became a monster kid. Love sci-fi. Could you explain that a little bit for us?
Again, I guess my first exposure to monsters was the discovery of dinosaurs, and that they're real monsters, so to speak, thunder lizards, all of that. And it was just like, it just opened my world to science. And from there, of course, and through television, you see the various monster characters and their various iterations, things like that. It was just a milieu of different things that came together.
But
it really got me involved. And I guess with my young mind and the period, I'm dating myself here, that I grew up in, I discovered after school Dark Shadows.
Like the soap opera.
Dark Shadows.
And it's my goodness, what in the world is this?
Right, but you couldn't look away. You couldn't look away.
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And we were living in Minnesota at the time, and it's like, it was just really cool. And then, of course, growing up with Saturday morning cartoons like we did, of course, Scooby-Doo was a favorite of mine, and all the monsters they were going after and all that. So I was really immersed in that whole monster world. And then
if my math is right, you were in Minnesota during the Bud Grant era.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I was a Tarkenton fan, so from Giants to Vikings, and I've kept my hand in Vikings fandom ever since. So
little bonding going on here, folks.
My favorite team since I was a kid.
Yeah. Now, when you were 12, you told us when you were 12, you made a transition into comics. What kind of comics did you? Were you a Marvel guy, DC guy? What'd you like?
I was a Marvel guy.
Marvel guy.
The guy who got me into comics is a Marvel guy.
Okay.
But what happened is that I didn't, like I said, I was a Marvel guy, but I started out, my favorite superhero was Superman.
Okay.
But at the time but that was before I got into comics.
Right.
And when I started getting into comics, the first 12 comics I bought were all Superman comics, maybe even a little more than that. But he did something that, even looking at it with my 12-year-old mind, I said, this is stupid. And I said, you know what?
Uh-oh.
I can't do it. It's just too silly and for kids.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, man. You know how there's always this running gag that Superman is, no one knows that Superman is Clark Kent and he's trying to hide it. And then
Superman?
one day,
Clark Kent.
and then one day, Clark Kent had to interview Superman when he was with WGBS, I think.
Right.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
what he does, he jumps back and forth between being Superman and Clark Kent
At
so
super
fast.
speed.
Yeah, that no one can see him. And I'm like, you know what? Then why haven't you always done that? And I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. I just said,
Unforgivable
that's too
sin.
much. That was a bridge too far. And you know, even within the realm of suspension of belief, I'm like,
when you jumped over to Marvel, was there a favorite?
yeah, you know what, man? What got me into Marvel really were the Treasury editions. And my grandfather had bought my brothers and I some Treasury editions. And the two
Those were the really big ones?
Yeah. And the two I got were the Fantastic Four and the Hulk. And to this day, the Fantastic Four is my favorite Marvel title ever. The Hulk is my favorite single superhero. And that's when I really got into them. And the way they set them up is that those Treasury editions had a myriad of different stories. So you got a nice cross section of adventures.
A good starter education too.
Exactly. And from then I got some more Treasury editions, and I started buying comic books regularly, and that was
you mentioned, and I know we're going to jump back and forth, but I know you mentioned in an aside comment about science and science fiction, and now you're talking Fantastic Four. I can see the connection here because, you know, a lot of young guys that I knew when we were reading comics and they were in the Fantastic Four, we were all clear that we were going to grow up and invent particle separators and dimensional, you know, transportation.
Ultimate nullifiers.
Yeah, and just be jumping all over the galaxy or multi-dimensions. Yeah, I, of course, have not succeeded in doing that yet, but I'm close.
It's a great...
But I just wanted to, because Chris had mentioned your education. So you're 6 with monsters, and then you're 12 with superheroes and comics. And obviously, at some point, your education clicked in there. So you're reading anyway. But what was it what did you decide to pursue for an educational trail here? Because I know one leads into the other. And believe me, folks, you start to hear how this all connects.
Yes. Basically, because of my love for science and science fiction, I wanted to, there's really no way to go into science fiction, at least when I grew up. No one even knew what that meant. So basically, through sublimation, you figure out something that's more socially acceptable. And I love science anyway. That was always my best subject. So I decided to go into science and become a doctor. That's what I wanted to do. So I majored in zoology at first, and then I switched to microbiology, but discovered I didn't really have the patience nor the aptitude to go into the medical field. But research, that's something I really like, genetic engineering. So after I got my degree in microbiology from Howard University, I then went into grad school at Howard to study genetic engineering, and I worked for National Institutes of Health, NIH, in the laboratory of biochemistry at the National Cancer Institute. So I worked there for a time and then moved into the private sector for a short period of time when I was going to grad school. But I was really inspired to get into film because of Spike Lee. Spike Lee came out with She's Gotta Have It in '86. And I didn't even know brothers could direct films. I never even thought about it. And of course, during that time,
didn't know about Gordon Parks, huh?
And I like movies, of course.
Yeah.
But I wasn't a film aficionado or historian or anything. And then, like I said, my knowledge was limited because I really like just monster movies and sci-fi movies. And there was no one even majoring in film when I was in school. But you fast forward just a year after Spike Lee came out with She's Gotta Have It, And there were legions of kids, no matter what color they were,
Right.
who were now trying to get into film because Spike Lee, I think he demystified film for a
Well,
legion.
he would put out the film and then he would publish like his notebook from the
Yes.
I found those to be gold.
Yes.
The first 4 films, I couldn't wait to get the companion book and find out what he was thinking and how he made the decisions. And it really demystified. Yes, I agree 100%.
Yeah, that was really something. And now I had a decision to make. And so while I was in grad school for genetic engineering, I congruently took television and film courses, and I was trying to decide which one was going to win out. And I didn't even finish the entire semester before I said, you know what? I'm going to withdraw and just pursue film, because I was in research seminar one day, supposed to be listening to my genetics professor, and I'm writing notes about my screenplay. And I said, that's it. That won out.
Yeah.
And so now it was about the fact that I knew nobody. How do I get into the film industry? You know,
That's Aristotle. You are what you do most often, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how did you go from, okay, I'm going to withdraw from genetic engineering, I'm going to commit here, I know nobody?
Yeah.
That's an important area to discuss, because a lot of our audience, they know the same amount of people.
Yeah.
So
Well,
how'd you handle it? What'd you do?
The thing is, really, it was about saving money at that point and moving to California, trying to figure that whole thing out, because I was in
Minnesota
DC.
or
well, I was in DC at the time.
okay.
Right,
So
Howard.
the thing is, I needed to save a certain amount of money, so I thought, and finish up a couple of things. I still had a back bill to pay with school, and I knew I needed to go out to California with product, meaning a couple of screenplays, and trying to hone my craft as best I could without really knowing anyone, especially who was doing anything at the time. And I made the transition in '92 and tried to figure it out. And it was rough, because I wound up living in my car for a time for 6 weeks until I could figure out how to do this, and then what I was going to do for money as I pursued this thing, not knowing anyone. And I promised myself I wasn't going to bounce anymore, because I was also with moonlight as a bouncer, working in a couple of area nightclubs in DC. I did not want to fall back on science anymore, because usually if you have a plan B, things are going to get rough enough so that you will fall back on it. You'll, and once you do that, it's going to mollify, or it can mollify, whatever fire in your belly you need to pursue what you want to do with reckless abandon. You know what I'm saying? And so I told myself it was either rise or die,
Okay.
And thank you, Jesus, I was able to figure it out. I did meet someone, a casting director, who got me a job on Michael Jackson video. And what that was, I was only an extra, but I wound up meeting John Singleton. He took a liking to me.
Sure.
And we became friends. In fact, I think it was funny. There was a kind of a four-way conversation I was in with him, Michael Jackson, and I think another cat. And I think we were talking about, and I came up with an idea too. Now, I knew this one guy who, when I told him that, he just laughed uncontrollably. His thing was like, and I'm like,
wow.
But what he didn't know is, because of that, I got to write one of the screenplays for the Black Panther movie that John Singleton was slated to direct back then with Wesley Snipes. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I was allowed to do that, and it got all the way to John Jasney, who was the head of Island Pictures, and now he presides over the Monsterverse over at Legendary. Right. So you never really know. And how one opportunity can lead to another. And later on, John Singleton and I were on the verge of selling a TV series based on one of my graphic novels. My thing was, or is right now, you really have to, you want to do something, pursue it. And don't let anyone say to you nay, or say you don't have the talent, because they don't know. And sometimes you don't know. But as long as you keep your hand on that yoke and pursue it, good things can happen. There's no guarantee, of course.
Well, it also, I can't help but note that you mentioned, I'm not sure which video it was, I was just an extra. And then almost the next sentence or two, you're like, I was in this conversation with John Singleton.
The director.
That's fascinating that somehow you got in to be an extra, and then there was a confidence enough without that hard sell. You've seen people do that, and that's always a turnoff. But can you talk about how organically you helped create that opportunity by being yourself?
Yeah. And I think what it was is that, of course, at the time I was a strapping young man in the pride of my soul.
Yeah.
I was well built, and everyone was floored by my voice. So that led people to come talk to me. And John Singleton and Michael Jackson were among those individuals.
I gotta tell you, I would pay money to hear a conversation between you and Michael. That would have been fantastic.
But yeah. Now, one thing I will say about Mike, I don't know if his voice is necessarily that high all the time.
It seems a little staged.
Yeah. It didn't register as unusual when I met him. So I was like,
right.
Yeah. I think part of it is like the Hollywood thing. He was cool. He was very cool. But yeah, I think, yes, exactly. And I think that's what, kind of allowed me to move on that set a little bit, because a lot of people gravitated towards me.
Okay.
And it was just a matter of, okay, how am I going to do this? Trying to figure it out, trying to meet people. One thing I will say is that job led me to pursue acting, because so many people like my look and the sound of my voice or whatever, that they were like, you could probably do something. Right. Now, like I said, I didn't come out there to be an actor. I wanted to write, and that's it. Being in front of the camera, I'm not going to say it was an anathema to me, but it's just not something I really wanted. But being an extra, I did discover something, that when I started to do it to make money, to bring in money, it's actually the best film school that you can attend, of the best free film school you can ever attend, if you, number one, become observant, keep your mouth shut, and know when to ask questions and who to ask them of. You know what I'm saying? And that really helped me as well, because you got people who really said, okay, so you're really serious about trying to do this, or you really want to know some information. I'm like, yeah, I want to know how to do it, how this whole thing works, how to comport yourself on a set, how a set works, because I didn't know anything.
And you're not doing this golly gee thing. You're being clear and serious and authentic, again, about wanting the information, because that information will be put to good use.
Exactly. In fact, when I was at Howard, the DGA came there with a documentary film about the assistant directors program. And I remember going there with some enthusiasm. And I'm watching this documentary, and I didn't really understand it. And I don't see any directing going on if this is an assistant directors program. And so after the film was over, I went to the two DGA people who were there, and I said, how many people to become directors through this assistant directors program? And they said, a few, but not many. And I couldn't understand why. But it wasn't until I got to Hollywood and started working on a few movie sets that I saw that the term assistant director was actually a misnomer. You know what I'm saying? You're not doing any directing. What you're doing is basically, you're a gopher handling background are doing various things
You're a
to
wrangler
help the
at times.
production. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're not doing any real, you're not doing any directing or anything creative. And it's okay, I see. And so I knew immediately that's not what I want to do. I'm not going to do any DJ program like that.
Now, there's a couple of things here. I want to just move it a little bit forward. So you went out to Hollywood with the express desire to write. You had this opportunity as an extra, which got you next to a great director, John Singleton, and you had that opportunity to talk with him and begin to grow and learn, which led to you eventually having an opportunity to write a script for a possible Black Panther film at that time that Singleton was going to work on. And we know that particular project didn't happen, but there are certain projects that you did make happen, one of them in comics and one of them in film. So I'm curious, just in terms of the chronology here, which one do you want to hit on first? Was it Blue Marvel, or is it the other one, the film?
We can talk about Underworld.
Okay.
Because that led to me getting the opportunity to do Blue Marvel.
Okay, Underworld.
So, yes, like I told you before, the thing about extra work is if you're smart, not that I'm smart, but
hey, come on. We just heard your educational
background, okay?
We just heard your educational track. Don't even play that.
Yeah. My thing is realize how you can take advantage of it. Extra work can really be a great boon to you. So I was an extra on a movie called Stargate.
Sure.
And the director of Underworld, Len Wiseman, he was a prop assistant on Stargate. He saw me, heard me, and was like, who's that guy? I've seen him before. He hadn't, but he thought I was someone he had seen in the film industry doing movies, and he thought I had a part on it. Then found out I was just an extra. He liked my look, the pitch of my voice, this, that, and the other, and he wanted me for this Western he was going to shoot. That never happened. But we saw that we had a lot in common by way of monsters and movies, things like that. He was trying to be a director, but he got into Roland Emmerich's camp through their prop department.
Mm-hmm.
He was prop assistant on Stargate, Godzilla, Independence Day, things like that. And he would invite me to set and have lunch with him. And I got to meet a whole lot of cool guys like Patrick Tatopoulos, you know what I'm saying? And you know who he is, the great production designer and director. And one thing led to another. So when he finally got his opportunity to start directing by doing music videos, he got with ICM and they were sending him nothing but bad scripts, horrific scripts. And it's funny the way it works, because you'd be surprised at what gets made in Hollywood and has, has actual actor attachments and money attached, but they were awful. He had a meeting with Dimension Films and they wanted to do a werewolf movie because they felt that Blade had done so well for the vampire genre. So Lynn and I had written a script together before, so he liked my mind and my style, this, that, and the other. So he calls me and he says, well, look, I went to Dimension, they want to do this werewolf movie, what do you think? And I said, I don't know, dude, because my thinking was that wolves are not really, and excuse this term, they're not sexy in a way that maybe vampires are, especially if you look at the logistics of production design or creature design. There were only 2 werewolf movies to speak of, maybe 3 at the time. And that was, of course, the original Wolfman movie that was dated, makeup effects outdated. Then you had The Howling, which was done in 1980, I think. And then shortly thereafter, well, really around the same time, American Werewolf in London. But the hair was matted, you know what I'm saying? The special effects transformation were very slow, and the technology that's the best we've seen at the time. I told him that I'll think about it. If you promise me we can do a snout-nosed werewolf, bipedal werewolf. And if we do that, I'm down. I said, give me a week and let me see what I can come up with. So I came up with an idea that he liked. And he said, we talked about it a little bit. He said, I guess we should come over and start beating out the scenes. So went over to his house. And at the end of the session, I said, now look here. We can't go in to this guy with just one idea, because if he doesn't like it, then where are we? We have to have at least two. And I had heard about a situation from a friend of mine when he got a fantastic opportunity to pitch an idea to the Jim Henson Company. And after your concomitant small talk, and you get into it, it's okay, well, what do you have? And he says, we have this cool Bigfoot idea. And the way we wanted to do it, and the guy said, we already have a Bigfoot idea or project we're working on. What else do you have? And the guy looked at his partner and was like, we don't have anything. That was it. The guy was like, okay, look, if you guys have something else, come on back. We'll talk about it. And he never got in that room again. That was it. And so I told Lynn that story is we have to have two ideas. And he's, I don't have anything. I'm like, I have this idea. I said, what if we do a Romeo and Juliet story? But of course, instead of Montagues and Capulets, we have werewolves on one side, but vampires on the other. And make it this supernatural, surrealistic, star-crossed interracial love story that's set against the backdrop of a centuries-old race war. You know what I'm saying? And I remember him folding his arms and looking at his feet. It was like, I don't know, is this gonna work? The rest is history. And that's the way it often goes. But I got to tell you, true to form, it took a while for it to sell, because you bring in, they brought in another writer. They were looking at, these are two new guys. You know, what do they really know? And then here's the thing. You have that creative myopia amongst the gatekeepers or producers. It's like, werewolves and vampires, you mean they're enemies or they're races? They didn't get it. What I remember, there was one producer, he wanted the werewolves to look like Sabretooth in the X-Men. With mutton chops and long fingernails. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? But that's the way they think. And they think that the audience won't understand if you do anything other than what we did. And it's crazy the way it works. And that's why Hollywood can be this crucible of confusion so often. You know what I'm saying?
Until somebody breaks through. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of
yeah. That's the story of how I got Underworld. You know,
but
you also got to act in.
Yes. One of the things I had done is said to myself, you have to learn how to double up duties or triple up duties, because one thing leads to another. You have to be able to feed yourself different career opportunities. You know what I'm saying? So it's one thing to write it, but I've been acting too. Let me write myself apart. And I know that the power comes from eventually producing. And that's another check. You see what I'm saying? So my thing was, I'm going to write myself apart and I'm going to produce it too. So now one project yields me 3 points on my resume. That's the way you do it.
Absolutely. Chris,
which was the, it's almost an unfair question, so I apologize before I ask it. Which was the most challenging? Was it the selling writing, or selling yourself as a writer, producing, or actually getting the role you wrote for yourself? Which was the biggest challenge?
I think they all came with their unique challenges, because when you're writing, a lot of people don't realize that most movies have multiple writers. The thing is, the last two that are on it, they usually get the credit. You know what I'm saying? Even though all they're doing is just moving scenes around, adding little snippets of dialogue. They're building off of the plot structure that others have done before them,
right,
who aren't going to be on the final, names aren't going to be on the final product. And there is that. Then you have to deal with the myopia of whoever you're trying to sell it to. Because there are some people who just don't understand and they want to change the whole thing. Like this one company, they love the script, but they wanted to redline and X all of the action out of it. And I'm like, wait a minute, then why do it? and it's, you're not going to get a good answer. And like I told you, then one producer wanted to make them look like Sabretooth of the X-Men with the mutton chops. Then when you want to play the role, you have to realize, when I wrote my first draft, of course, I gave myself a substantial part, but I made sure there was someone above me. You know what I'm saying? So my thing is, you never make yourself 1 through 5 on the call sheet. If you're a writer, actor,
right,
what you do, protect yourself by making yourself number 6 through 10.
right,
Then they're not going to care.
right.
But when the other writer came on, he started expanding my role. And I said,
No, hold it.
yeah, I said, no, because if you do that, they're going to get some rapper to come in and play the role. I said, no, what we do is we keep it cool, but smaller. You know what I'm saying? And so the character I created, Lucian, I think at first his name was, I called him Kami. Then we changed it to Lucian. No, actually, we used Lucian and elevated him. And what happened is that he can be played by Michael Sheen, who is a prodigious actor. But I was left at that right-hand man with lesser duties, but was his, like I said, Thundercat, so to speak.
Right,
But that kind of helped solidify me. And so, like I said, each stage comes with its own challenges.
right.
But that's the nature of the beast. Nothing you can do.
I would love to have you back at another time to really talk about that whole experience, because that in and of itself is a full-blown adventure from inception to final days of shooting or release or whatever. But
it'll be the Underworld episode.
Right, exactly. We'll do that in October, right?
But
hey, it sounds good.
But maybe we can talk about now how success begets success, or opportunity begets opportunity, and then you have to start juggling all the different things. You're screenwriting now, you're doing some producing, you're doing some acting, and then Marvel knocks on your door. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Nicely done, Chris. Nicely done.
Every once in a while, I do something right.
So I had tried to get into Marvel right after college. I got a letter, a couple of rejection letters, rejection form letters I still have. And I was like, man, and this was in the 80s. I was like, I guess that ship has sailed. Then a buddy of mine had gotten into Marvel, and he had said, I can hook you up with this person. Maybe if you're interested. I'm like, you know what? Yes, I am. And when they contacted me, Marvel contacted me, they said, we've been looking for you. And I'm like, really? And they put me in touch with Joe Quesada and Axel Alonso. I sent them some of the comic books I had done with this other company that were based on my own IPs, that I still own. And so I was like, they read those, okay, let's get working. And they gave me the New Warriors. And that was a difficult situation for me. Axel really taught me there is a difference between what you read in comics as a kid and how to actually write them in the modern age. You know what I'm saying? And you have to know the difference. It can't sound Stan Lee-ish. And he was right. Can't sound Stan Lee-ish. Comics are written differently now, but there is still connective tissue, which I found later you can still have. And got the job on the New Warriors. happy with it. But it ended after 20 issues. And I then met Tom Beaufort. I've had a brief dalliance with through email exchange. And of course, I had done some other single issues at Marvel, a couple of Spider-Man stories, a couple of what if stories.
Right.
And I pitched him this idea that I came up with when I was 12, and this character called the Blue Marvel. I called him something else before, but I told him the story, and I had already written the spec script. And he was like, I like it. And that became the Blue Marvel miniseries.
How many issues was that?
You know, say that again, sir?
How many issues was that?
That was 5 issues. 5 issues.
Issue miniseries. Okay.
Like Orpheus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. He said his character returned. Yeah.
Give it time. Everybody comes back.
What year was that?
Okay, in terms of the year, it had to have been 2007.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the year, but it came out in 2008.
Okay.
But like I said, like I told you before, the day after Barack Obama became president. You know?
Right.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know there's some stuff that we really want to get to, some current projects that you're working on. I'm just going to beg you for a quick moment. The Barack Obama president moment that you shared with us in the green room. Can you share that with us now? Just
yeah. For whatever reason, and I can't remember what it was, there was a delay scheduling of the book from what I, like I said, from what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, Bush was president. So, you know, I was going to have George Bush rescind the John Kennedy executive order and reinstate Blue Marvel officially as a full hero, things like that.
In the storyline, Blue Marvel had lost some credibility of some sort.
He didn't lose credibility. He was asked to stand down and not be a hero because it was revealed that he was Black. And Kennedy was like, there is no way in the world I am going to be able to push, you know, the concept of what the civil rights movement wants and ending Jim Crow once and for all, if the world realizes there is a superpowered Black man running around who can change the balance of power on the planet from the hegemony to the minority. And
that
he's
is a fascinating concept.
Yeah. And I'm like, and he's can't do it for the good of the country and what I'm trying to do. Would you stand down and just go back to civilian life? And reluctantly, he obeys. He understands, and he does that. What happened? I was going to have George Bush reinstate him, but when the series was done, Barack Obama was now president. So I was going to have Barack Obama reinstate Adam Bashir. And Marvel was like, no. And they gave me some crazy story that it's taking advantage of something that's in the news or political. It's cheapening it, even though they did the same thing. Yeah, and there were some people
not that many
Marvel,
months later.
Yeah, I know. And he met Spider-Man. But
it's cheapening it until we do it.
But he couldn't meet the Black hero. So there were some people at Marvel who came to me later on and said, yeah, one said they didn't want you to have those sales because that book would have shot through the roof. They sold,
right, so they saved it would have shot through
the roof. And then they just wanted to save it for their flagship character. That meeting, that's what it was.
There's another aspect of that just presents itself to me at this moment. You had the within the storyline, you had Kennedy saying to Blue Marvel, you can't stand out there right now with the civil rights movement, everything going on. It's a hot mess. You can't be representation because this is going to throw everything into a turmoil, and this is not going to work. We can't have this kind of power represented at this time.
Exactly.
And then in real life, you can't have a Black president who's real in a comic book reinstating a black superhero, because that kind of power, that kind of statement of power is not going to be well received at this time, or at least doesn't sit well with the individuals making that decision at that time.
It was
been about money. It could have been.
I think that discussion was. I think that decision was a little green tinted.
Yeah,
you know?
I think
they were looking to line their own pockets.
Yeah, there was levels of that discussion there. Either way, that seemed to mirror each other in that respect.
Exactly. And the thing is, exactly. And the thing is, a lot of these people, I don't necessarily think they're doing it out of malice, but a lot of them are tone deaf. And I'll give them that maybe, and maybe there are commerce issues that they're thinking about long term. I don't know, but to me, a good idea is a good idea. And and to stop that is, to me, a little unconscionable. And but what are you going to do?
I want to roll this into, since we're talking about comics and we're also talking about social issues and we're talking about presentations of images of people of color and whatever. Maybe Chris, you think this is maybe a good time to get into the current material that he presented?
Yeah, I'd really love to talk about. There's the Rise of the Djinn, and then there's Dark Thunder. Is that right?
DARKSTORM, isn't it?
DARKSTORM. Excuse me.
That's the sequel. There's Dark Thunder is going to be the sequel to DARKSTORM.
I must beg forgiveness. I read them this morning. Just got them in my hands. In DARKSTORM, the opening of.
By the way, I'm sorry, but just a quick setup. These are now properties, comic book properties that Kevin has written and created, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what we're about to talk about now. So just to lay that foundation.
In DARKSTORM's opening, and I'd love to talk to you about your process for opening, your techniques for opening, because you tend to open your stories with a bang. And in this one in particular, it's DARKSTORM versus all the other heroes. And you do something with all the other heroes that I thought was clever and courageous and hip, and really allowed for some deft, very quick and efficient commentary. There is a hero that actually is holding a tank or a car over his head, and we know that iconography there. That is a Superman character. There's another character that is the Hulk. There's another character that is a Captain America. There's one that's called Thor with a hammer. So I'd love for you to talk to us, if you can, about reimagining these classics. One, without inciting a lawsuit, and two, for the social commentary. So how did you do all that?
My thing is, in our mind's eye at least, all of these heroes exist at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Whether they're independent or from the mainstream big two. And I remember Lynn Wein saying once that there aren't but so many superpowers to go around. You know what I'm saying? And so you're going to parallel some. But I do think that you can use analogs as a way to talk about the state of how comics are done, or how stories are done, or how their universes work. And that can provide a framework for you to tell your own stories within those particular paradigms. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so that's what I do with DARKSTORM, because you do realize that as writers working for corporate comics, you're actually writing with one hand tied behind your back. And there are stories or situations that they never get into. And it's why Christopher Priest once told me that when you read characters' histories, there are natural stories that just jump out at you. And it's amazing that they're never pursued after 80 years.
Right.
It's why hasn't someone done this? There are behind the scenes reasons as to why. political reasons as to why. So what I do is I use that reality to talk about in my fantasy stories. You know what I'm saying? And you really get some tasty stuff when you do that. And so that's my rationale for, having analogs.
It created, of course, the opening is slam bang. So you have the
Yes.
action on one level. You're revealing bits and pieces about DARKSTORM, but then there's this whole other level of commentary.
Yes.
Just as they're slamming past, and then there's the scene afterwards, a female actor and the shadowy leader, right?
Yes.
And I was like, oh, he's the one who's the editor-in-chief type. You know? Excellently well done. And what I love is the trick of those kind of things is, can you do all that organically? So then my question becomes, how do you personally, how do you work in your subtext so that it runs so organically?
I really don't think there is a trick to it. You know what I'm saying?
A trick, a technique. What works for you? What works for you? Poor words.
But I think what it is, that's where the meat of what you have to say is. What are you ultimately trying to say with this character, and how do you say it so that you're not hitting them over the head, but you're dropping hints? And it's just the subtleties in the way that you do it, and the interesting dialogue you use to lead your audience to certain conclusions, things that or the other. Because I think with so many things, our minds are naturally inclined to conspiracies anyway. Why is this really happening? What's the story behind the story? And so when you look at it from that perspective, it almost writes itself. You know what I'm saying? It really does. And it's, man, I wish they would do this more. But I think what happens with corporate comics, I think there are landmines you have to avoid.
Right.
There are internal and external politics. And there's something that I think happens now that a lot of people don't like to talk about. And those are things coming from the writers. And I can see, and some people might disagree with me, but I can see that a lot of writers have the attitude that I am not going to give Marvel and DC any great ideas. I will execute a storyline or a concept that they come up with, but I'm not giving away the gold. They can get the bronze, not getting the gold. The gold I'm saving for my own IPs. And you know what?
Learned what happened when people gave the gold for the first 50 or 60 years.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, we're all seeing that the movies are pursuing stories that are good, but that are 30 years old and more. You know what I'm saying? They know where the good storytelling is coming from. And I think a lot of writers know that, and they're like, hey, look, I'll take the job, but you're only getting me to do but so much. And I think that's why the product isn't as good now as it used to be. I've talked to a myriad of comic book store owners, comic shop owners, and they're like, people just aren't responding to the product. They're really not.
I think readers, they can tell if you're holding back.
Yeah.
And then they can also tell, and this has been happening in different phases and in different ways, when the story is just a vehicle for the marketing, or when they're trying to address something inorganically. This is a hot topic issue. We need to cover that somehow. And then the cart is before the horse.
We also have the fact that right now, at least in terms of the two bigger entities that we're talking about, DC and Marvel, that they really aren't publishing houses anymore. No. They're IP departments of larger conglomerates. And there's a certain amount of control there but also a great many of the storytellers, and this is, I'm older than this gentleman here, so I can even speak from.
You're older than a lot
Yeah,
of
I'm
people.
forming the
Holy
first comic
God,
book carved
about
on a rock,
80%
you
of the
know.
planet, but you know.
But here's the thing, we had comics initially were editors and writers. That's really that's what the teaming was. It was people who were editors coming out of pulp and whatever, and writers. And eventually, as the years progressed, it was editors and writers still, but with illustrators. Okay, so it's editor, writers, and illustrators. At a certain point, once it becomes a business, a huge business, now you've got distribution, you've got corporate mindsets clicking in there, but you're still riding over a publishing house. But the moment it's no longer a publishing house, then it's more like what stories are catching trend attentions at the moment. Or
Well,
as Madison Avenue is so fond of saying, we got to talk down to our audience. We got to placate the audience as opposed to fascinating the audience. The quickest reference I'll make is during the 80s, 90s, with the advent of video games and things like that, people were saying, kids aren't going to read anymore. Young people aren't reading anymore. They're getting lost in the video games. That's it. They don't care about reading anymore. They don't care about reading anymore. They don't care about reading anymore. Harry Potter comes out, and suddenly young people are standing in line at midnight for a 300 to 500 page book with no images, because someone was giving them a storyline that fascinated them. That
well, I'd add one other thing, and especially with comics, we're not seeding the next generation. Now, there's all, you know, the expensive paper, the expensive ink, the expensive talent, true, but we're on a digital age, and the overhead for digital is far less than in print. And you could have, even if you put a section of your department for affordable comics that could seed the next generation, we'd have a much bigger audience to drive the stories, so you could pay the talent, and then you'd have people more willing, like you said, to give up the gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, are these companies going to do that? I know now that there are writers working for Marvel and DC who aren't even making $50 a page.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you can't live off that. That means that, like, even if you were making $100 a page, you would probably have to write 4 books a month, in order to meet your bills. That's if you live alone. And depending upon
you have a family.
But if you're only making $45 a page, what are you doing? And then the thing is, your editors, they're the ones coming up with the stories. So oftentimes you have to fit a round peg into a square hole, logistically sometimes, because these editors aren't writers. They're people who are reading the newspaper and getting their ideas from there. And they expect you to execute it without just executing whatever they say. And I don't know if that's going to work, but if you want this job, you got to make that round peg fit into that square hole. And a lot of these editors, I really don't think they're comic book fans. And that's not to say all of them. But when I mean comic book fans, it's you don't hire an editor who's 23 years old and they haven't, you know what I'm saying? And they haven't read the history of the books of the character that they're editing. You know what I'm saying? It's you better have read that whole character's history, or at least you better have read up to 1990. So you know what's foundational. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
But they don't require that they do that. They don't.
But the other thing
I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be fair. I think it can be a lot to ask them to pour over 50, 80 years of tomes, 60 years of these books. And it can be daunting, but I think that's what the job requires. I remember when I first started reading the Fantastic Four, I think they were at issue 162. You know what I'm saying? That was about 14 years of books at the time. But because I was a kid, all I had to do was homework and go to school. I had the time to read all that stuff.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But it reminds me of this other story, a quick segue. Shaquille O'Neal. I remember this one sports reporter was angry with him because someone came up to Shaq and they said, I like the way you play. I think you're aggressive in the paint. You have a nose for the ball. Your rebounding is second to none. You're physical. I really love your game. And you know how Shaquille O'Neal is. He's a big kid, and he was very appreciative. And he says, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Did you play? And it was Wes Unseld.
Oh.
And the sports writer was furious. And I said, okay, I get it. You don't like the fact that these young players don't know the history of their sport. But you have to realize that for a lot of these kids, like when I first started watching football, there weren't but 7 Super Bowls.
Easy to catch up.
Yeah, exactly.
The Vikings are in 4 of them, right?
Exactly. Now there are 57.
Right.
Can you expect a kid to pour over
right.
all of this history? And I don't know. I get it. I just think, yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
And if it's waters you don't want to wade into, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But is hiring young staff that may not know the whole history, I guess millennials or whatever, does that lend itself, do you think, to this current movement of reinventing these classic hero archetypes to reflect more modern politics? Did I put that gently enough?
I think so, because they don't have any connective tissue to the old characters and the old way of doing things. When we started reading comic books, Stan Lee was still writing.
Right.
Jack Kirby was still drawing.
Yes,
and Bob Kane was still alive. Simon & Schuster was still, and that's Simon & Schuster.
Siegel.
Simon & Schuster
was probably alive, but not relevant to this conversation.
They were still alive. And these were people who created the foundational characters and the foundational stories, and their proteges were still around.
Right.
But as these individuals start dying, then there's no one there to protect the integrity of what was created before.
Right.
And now the new people coming in are looking at it's a word I'm going to use that I think is a bit disrespectful, but I think it's commercially accurate. The characters become product. You know what I'm saying? And once they become sterile product, they become, in the eyes of these corporations, they become malleable.
Right.
And it's not about the characters as much as it is the costumes and the name. And anyone can be put into these costumes and carry the name. And that's all they care about. That's the only through line that they have. Everything else is like it's old. It was written at a bygone era when everyone was racist and everyone was misogynistic. And I'm like, come on now. A lot of these stories were simplistic, but they were written with a sense of adventure and a moral to the story.
Right.
And that's why we love them so much. Characters had principles. Now they're saying that you can't even have villains anymore because the villains have been wronged in some way, and that's why they are villains. So we have to have sympathy for the villain. Magneto has killed millions of people. Now you're going to make him a hero? You know what I'm saying? You don't do that. The Red Skull. to him.
One of
to
the
be
best
this
things
kind of person.
about villains was that you would see the flaws and you would feel
Yeah.
bad. You would have empathy that Dr. Doom so overblew his scars and
Yeah.
his jealousy that he went down this path.
He was still
Now we
a
can't do
scoundrel.
that. Now
Yeah,
we can't
exactly.
do
He was still a
that.
scoundrel. Now we can't do that. So now, if you look at Doctor Doom, if you look at Magneto,
Mhm.
they've become heroes now. Juggernaut has become a hero. Venom has become a hero. It's what are you doing? And I don't understand that. Now you don't have any good villains. Loki, and this might be because of Tom Hiddleston and
Right.
the great job he did. Loki is now not even Thor's enemy anymore. He might be
He's an
a
annoying little
semi,
brother.
he might have a sibling rivalry with
Right,
Loki,
right.
but
Yeah.
it's not the same anymore. And this is not good.
Okay, since we're in this territory, let me just interject this. And again, I think this is going to turn into a 2-episode conversation here. I just saw Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And as much
Great.
as there were a number of elements in that film that I really liked, there was an element that bothered me to no end. And I haven't been able to shake it yet.
I wasn't there. Is that what the problem was?
We have a villain in that film. And yes, they did attempt to give some sympathetic arc to his storyline. But the basic line here is we have this villain who is creating and destroying worlds in order to create this perfect world. In his own eyes. And there's a number of things, and again, I don't know how many people have seen the movie. I don't like to give away spoilers, so I will simply say that the things that he does are atrocious, absolutely atrocious, including mutilation and so forth and so on. And he is predominantly the only dark-skinned lead character in the film. And even in the world that he's trying to generate and create that's going to be perfect, there's little or no representation of color. Right. So here's an absolute villain, but he looks like me. And that bothers me. It bothers me. Now, it's not to say that we can't be villains. We are. There are some of us that really, as Richard Pryor used to say sometimes, thank God there are penitentiaries. Do need to be locked up. The reality is when people are playing those games with, as you were saying earlier, with flipping characters around, changing racial things or gender things in order to accommodate or actually maybe be actually authentically inclusive. I was like, how do we look at these things? How do we measure these things? And who's making these decisions? And so I look at heroes and villains, and I look at the possibilities in terms of good stories. And I look at where the story and what they're doing with this character is fascinating. And yeah, I can roll with that. Like Pitch Black with Vin Diesel, where he plays this extremely dangerous intergalactic criminal who's so dangerous the police, the intergalactic police, have to shackle him to a chair. But when they wind up getting trapped on this planet with these terrible creatures, the villain becomes the hero because he's the only force strong enough to deal with them. And that the thing that's cool is he's not a good guy. So you don't know if he's going to really do the right thing unless it's going to benefit him. And that was an interesting way to play with that story. But when they took that same character and put him in a bigger film, they lost track of that. And so once again, it was like, okay, I've seen this Formula 14. This is going to happen in these steps, and I'm bored already. I'm bored, and I'm 10 minutes into the film. So I think that one of the things we've got to be conscious of is who's dictating what kind of stories can be told, who's putting their fingerprints on. Maybe you have a good script, maybe you have a good director, a great director, great actors, but then you got the suits coming in and making decisions and forcing things in for gimmicks or purpose. So we have to look at that and hope that as the new generation takes over, I work with a lot of young filmmakers when I teach screenwriting, and a lot of them want what you and I are talking about, what we're talking about here. They want a good story. They want good guys and bad guys. They want to explore maybe more depth of characters, but they want a good story. So sometimes we've just got to be clear about who's in charge and who's making the decisions and respond accordingly. And hopefully with our dollars, if we don't feed the monsters, then they'll die off, in which case we'll have a better quality to choose from. I just want to look at the time a little bit. I just want to say, I know that you really wanted to speak about what you're doing with these books. And we were talking about that with DARKSTORM. You have another book called Rise of the Jinn.
Yeah, it's going to be retitled DJINNATRA, Rise of the Jinn, which will be, exactly. And simply put, I came up with this storyline years ago, but it's a tale about a terminally ill police detective who essentially discovers she is the prophesied member of an ancient race of genies, or the real term jinn. And it's about how she goes about, comes by this realization amidst looking for the serial killer who has not only terrorized the city, but killed her husband.
Yeah, I read the issue, by the way.
Turn her world upside down.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to do is tell these cool fish out of water stories. And I love all kinds of characters. And I thought that this was a good idea and a story to tell. And I'm really excited about it. And so we're doing it was originally done as a 3-issue miniseries published by myself and Zenescope, my friends Ralph Tedesco and Joe Bruce, and they really liked the story too. But now we're compiling it in a trade paperback, and I'm also creating additional materials and a new cover going to be drawn by Ron Garney.
Because the cover you got now is nice. Is that the one? Is that the new cover, or is it?
Yeah, no, that's the old cover. Yeah, we have a new cover. It's going to be a surprise, but it's a really cool project, and so I'm hoping people sign up and are there when we finally launch.
Let me plug this. Let me plug this because Chris plugged DARKSTORM. I want to plug Jinn because like Chris was saying, you have a style of your opening scene, smacks us right in, throws us right into the situation.
Right.
So we are literally thrown right into the situation of meeting this character that you talked about, this police detective, and how she comes onto the scene says a lot about her character and her relationships to the other policemen there. And you've already said something about her husband being killed. That's already out of the bag. So I can speak a little bit about that. There's a moment, just a quick moment between these two that shows the nature of their relationship and their connection. And then we're right into the action and bad things happen. Bad things happen. But also inexplicable things happen, which immediately lets you know that, okay, I'm dealing with hard-boiled serial killer stuff here, but there's also, what is this stuff going on here? This is on a whole nother level. Is it paranormal, supernatural, whatever? So you give us enough juicy questions at the beginning. But the other thing I like is when the smoke clears and she's trying to deal with everything that's occurred, read the book to find out what, there's this really nice scene between her and the pastor. Her pastor. And so this is another thing that we don't see very often is people's spiritual side of certain characters and how connected that is to their roots or to their lifestyle. So there's a really nice sequence there that, again, gives us another peek into her nature before stuff starts to happen again and we're off on that wild ride. So I think you really handled that very well, and I'm very intrigued to read the remainder of the book, because I think I've only read the first issue.
Yeah, that's something I try to do. I really try to get deeper into issues that maybe they don't like to touch on in mainstream books and really be a little bit more authentic about it. Like when you talk about, let's say, Christianity, being a Christian myself, it's important that you get the tenets of Christianity correct, not the myths that people espouse about Christianity that have nothing to do with it. You know what I'm saying? And so it's important to show them in their full authenticity. You see what I'm saying? And Christians aren't perfect by any means. We might,
Who is?
yeah, we might worship a perfect savior, but that's hardly who we are. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes you like to show that tension between being someone saved by grace and still being a sinful human being, and what that looks like and how that can be manifest sometimes. And I enjoy that kind of journey because we all struggle.
Absolutely. And Chris, I think you had read DARKSTORM, or a good portion of it.
Yeah, we're talking about Jinn now. So what I want to know, especially in context of what you just said about Christianity, why Jinns? Why'd you pick those? What was the attraction? How did you play with the different spirituality?
Okay, if you want to know, if you're asking for an actual, yeah, if you're actually, I'm gonna say my entrance into the story was actually a little bit more peripheral or simplistic than that. I was flipping through old television, and I have not seen some of these shows like that. Are you guys familiar with MeTV?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Alex knows MeTV.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
You know, and I'm not going to get too far into it, but man, I forgot about some of these shows. I saw an episode of Mr. Ed. I am like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
This show is hilarious. You're wondering how they did it. Man, this is crazy. But it was simple fun. You know what I'm saying? Okay. But then I look at something like I Dream of Jeannie.
Right.
And I am like, what if this was a serious show? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
It wasn't a sitcom. What would it be like for a woman like this to exist? Because I think they never do really get into the origin of Jeannie, but I do think that she was mortal at one point, and she got changed or something like that. And so that provided the impetus to my thinking, how can I create a Jeannie-like character, but do it in a way that reflects the real myths? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so that's how I came up with the idea and how to incorporate that into the real world and come up with something interesting.
Chris and I did a whole episode about prompts, about words that trigger images and things like that. So yeah, this is very much in tune. Very much in tune.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a chicken or egg question. What comes first, the character, the setting, the situation, and how does it progress from there for you?
For me, I come up with concept first.
Okay.
Because I remember one of the early agents I had, or an agent I had one time, told me, he says, you're a little bit different. He says, most people come up with a character first. Then they come up with everything that goes around it. But I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I can do that. I come up with a concept first and drop a character that can execute that concept along with the concomitant nuances associated with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you start and then the problems a person like that would have in that area. And that's where you get that character from. You see what I'm saying? Now, I might do it backwards from what this guy was saying and what I've heard other friends of mine say, but that way works for me.
Yeah.
That way works for me.
Let me ask you, in terms of Jinn and also DARKSTORM, and there's another property that you're producing at this point?
Yeah, the film that I directed is called King of Killers. And that'll be out in a couple of months. We got picked up by Lionsgate.
Okay.
Yes. But another couple of projects I'm working on that haven't been announced yet. Now that we're in the middle of the strike, who knows what's going to happen, you know.
So wait a minute, let me just keep this track clear for me now. So you have DARKSTORM and Jinn as the comic book properties that you're developing now, and I believe there's a Kickstarter?
Yeah. Jinn is the Kickstarter.
Jinn is the Kickstarter. When is that launching?
That is going to launch probably in September.
No, I'm sorry. I meant the Kickstarter itself. Is that ongoing now?
Okay, no, what's happening right now is I'm just promoting it. The fact that the Kickstarter is going to happen. So right now, I'm telling people about it. They can sign up with the links I provided for you to be notified. Yeah, exactly, to be notified when the launch is. And at the end of August, beginning of September is when I'll launch.
Got you. Okay, so that's when the Kickstarter will kick up.
Yes.
And you're looking at the books being available
through the, through the Kickstarters. I'm not going to kickstart DARKSTORM, at least not yet. I've been working on that book for a while. It's out right now. People, if people want to order it, they hit me up on Facebook and my social media, and I'll send them the information where they can order their copy.
Okay. So then so there's the Kickstarter campaign for DJINN, and we have links in the comment section, and we'll also pump that out on our social media. And that link will take you to a place where people can sign up to be notified when the Kickstarter actually launches, which might be early September. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, you mentioned the film that you have coming out that you directed called, once more, what was the title?
King of Killers.
King of Killers. Okay.
Yes.
When did you produce this, or when did this project start?
I shot it last year in February.
February 22.
Yeah, February of 2022. I've been working on the script for a little while, and we got a great cast in Elaine Moussi and Frank Grillo, Stephen Dorff, and George St. Pierre, the MMA martial artist, and also starring moi.
Moi! Oh, wow! Mark Moi, great guy. No, Kevin's in it too.
And it's really cool. It's a really cool tale about a contest to see who is the best assassin on the planet, orchestrated by the villain Draco's, who it was played by Frank Grillo. He's done over 85 films. He was great as an antagonist. And our star, Elaine Moussi, he is, I think the best way to describe is a prodigious up-and-comer. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Martial arts are impeccable. His acting is phenomenal, real. We did a lot of cool things. With a small, modest budget, we turned in some of the best cinematic action I've seen. Our fight choreographer, Ryan Tannen, he came in and did an excellent job, really preparing us, getting us straight. It was a fun project. And
where did you shoot?
We shot in Winnipeg, up in Canada. It's wild because I've been trying to direct for some time. But once again, it illustrated the level of shenanigans that is endemic in really all industries. If there's something that exists that humans have put their hands or fingerprints on, you are going to find shenanigans. And I remember I was talking with one of the producers right before we were up for the shot of the day. And he starts laughing and pats me on the shoulder and just walks away. And I'm thinking to myself now, why was it so difficult to get to this point with all the other projects I've had? Why was this one seemingly painless? And it's because of the people that you surround yourself with, you know what I'm saying? And the people you try to keep at bay. And it's also these subtle things. I learned some really interesting things about why projects might not get made. And a lot of it has to do with ego. And one little thing I'll tell you, I asked one of the producers that very question is, what goes on? He says, believe it or not, when you do one of these independent films, a lot of people do them backwards. And they're unwilling to, the wrong word is compromise. The right word is adjust. But people take it as compromise, or they take it as capitulating. And it's like, you can't look at it that way. Quentin Tarantino, from what I hear, was supposed to shoot Pulp Fiction for $25 million. I don't know what happened, but Harvey told him, you get 6.
Oh.
And it's, I guess we're making it for 6. And that's not capitulating, that's adjusting. because that man won the Palme d'Or. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of times, that's what happens. They don't have, a lot of these productions don't necessarily have their financial structure in place properly. So what happens, they think they're going to be shooting with this much money. That's what they want. But looking at what they can get based upon the cast they can garner or get or whatever, they might have to come down here.
Right.
And a lot of directors will say, no, we can't do the movie. And it's really, and so that project doesn't get done. Or they don't like the cast that they're able to get. So they just say, forget it, I'm not doing it. You can't do that. You really can't do that. And also,
just keep moving forward.
Yeah, you have to adjust. I knew this one guy, and this taught me a lesson as well. He wanted to write, direct, and produce just like Sylvester Stallone. So he had this script this producer wanted to buy, but they told him he couldn't star in it. And he says, nah, that's okay, I'll hold on to it. And he said 20 years later, that script is still in my drawer. And he never did do what he wanted to do at the level he wanted to do it. And he says he always wondered, had he basically said, you know what, let me adjust. Here is a script, do what you need to do. He wonders if he would have had a better trajectory with his career. And you have to understand that. And look, I'm going to say something that people might not like here, but you might very well have to give the first one away. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe, possibly even the second.
Yeah.
What are you prepared to do in order to get to where you want to go?
And if you're not willing to give something away, then take responsibility for that.
Exactly. Exactly. Because I think when it comes to being a creative and trying to survive in order to do what you want to do, I think a lot of us are practically wrong, but I think we're functionally right. In other words, you're not going to go along traditional steps to get to the mountaintop. It might be more of a zigzag upward with hills, valleys, or whatever. And people are going to say you're crazy, it's not working, and you're going to get dinged for it until you get that gold.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden everyone says something different.
Yeah, then you're an overnight success.
Exactly. Exactly. Let's see there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I really want to keep this going, but I want to also respect everybody's time. Chris, I think you had a couple of questions that you wanted to ask in terms of rounding this off.
I think we're pretty rounded. Next thing I would ask would get us in a whole different topic. I think I could save them, especially if we can send a nice thank you and a heart shape to Alex and try and get you back for another episode when we talk about Underworld.
Yeah.
We talk about Young Justice. There's just too much Kevin for one episode. That's what it is.
what I do, he's right. Chris is right. And what I do is where we are right now, because we started off with this young man who gave up science and went out to LA living in his car for 6 weeks with a script in hand, wound up doing extra work in a Michael Jackson video, which put him in the position to be in the right place to meet and talk with and become friends with John Singleton, to here. And as you said, zigzags, hills and valleys, and we didn't even talk about the monsoons you had to deal with, but this is where you are. And the one thing that has made all of that possible, actually two things, and something Chris and I talk about, is in terms of being true to the story, be authentic. And you've always been authentic. All the years I've known you, all the conversations we've had, I've always known who I was talking to, because you have always been authentically you, and that's a blessing. And then the other thing is you've been consistent. You set goals for yourself, and you were willing to do the hard work to get there. And my buddy here set goals for himself that I bow to on numerous occasions, because, sorry, shut up. It's my time. This guy would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to have
3
some
o'clock
writing
today.
time, to then get ready for work and go teach for 8 hours. And then once he and his lovely had children, he'd still get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get some writing done. So then he could help with the babies, the kids at 6 or whatever, to then
Once
go.
they got up.
And
That
he
was
did that
it, bro.
for 25 years or more. And then once he got past that, he went into, okay, now it's my time to try and build some of the other things that I want with my career. And he's been very consistent and dedicated to that. So we're definitely about being authentic, being true to the story, and being consistent. And that's why I enjoy hanging out with him. And that's why I really enjoy hanging out with you, buddy.
2 things. One, Kevin, just so you know, I had to pay him $25 to say that. Number 2,
and it was worth every dollar.
Number 2, the other thing that I would add that Kevin taught us today is observe. Be observant, learn, everything's around, and ask questions, but know who you can ask them to, when the right time is. He's always, in all the anecdotes he told us today, he is always present and aware and observant, and that's gold.
Right. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the other thing one would say to that is you are willing to be the student.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people walk into the and they immediately want to be the professor or they want to be the star. You were willing to be the student while you were learning your craft and building your goals and your dreams, and that's perfect.
Yeah, and what makes it kind of scary too, and I would tell a lot of people this, even though we're going to worry about it, don't worry about your age. You know what I'm saying? Because I was in what I called an advanced age. I was 28 when I got out to California. And as opposed to most people who are probably closer to 20, 21. And so I was already behind. And I tell a lot of guys, or anyone who will listen, really, it is a young single man's game. Of course, young single woman too. It's a young single man's game, and you got to be careful, and you have to learn how to adjust. I can't. It's funny. I met quite a few people who went to USC's film school, right, to be a director, and they're not directors now, and they're in their 50s or older. And it's what happened. You went to the best film school in the country, and to a man, most of them said, I thought people were going to give me their scripts and I was going to be able to start directing. I'm like, in what universe did you think people were going to give you a script to direct? You didn't think about writing your own. They came out to be the directors, not writers. And I'm like, if you don't create your own properties and your own work, I don't know how you survive. And that's the problem with a lot of guys I know who are my age, still trying to act and haven't really done very much. They're waiting by the phone, waiting for it to ring. They don't write. You have to create your own work. And a lot of people say, I'm not built for that. I can't. You know what? You're in the wind, man.
Learn.
Yeah, you do one of 2 things. You either do what Kevin is saying and you write and create the properties you want to be in, or you connect with the person who's writing that property and you create the team dynamics that makes it possible. You're writing, I'm directing, we got an actor here, let's go.
Exactly, because you have to realize, and this is real talk here, if you are someone who doesn't create your own properties, you're waiting for everyone else above you to pass on different projects.
Right.
And then they come down the tiers. They come to the people at this tier. Then they come to the people at this tier. And then way down the trough, they might come to you, but they're going to everybody on your tier. How do you know who's going to get the job?
The job's going to be by the time it gets to you.
Okay, now you just said something there.
Baked potato man.
Exactly. And it's like, and these guys need to pay their bills too.
Yeah.
So you might take a job that you don't want because it pays your bill. But what if it's a bad job? What if it's a bad script and you know it, and it turns out bad? Now you're in director jail or actor jail.
You're skunked.
Yeah.
That stink is on you. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And the thing is, it can be frightening. Like, I knew this one actor who will remain nameless, and he was in a big movie. His name was on everyone's tongue. He got an opportunity after that film, and there were 2 projects he told me about. One was a bad script, horrible script, but it paid $2 million. The other one was a phenomenal script, but it didn't come with much money at all. Guess which one he took?
I'm going to take a wild shot and go for the $2 million.
Okay. No, he took the great script.
Oh.
And it turned out to be a horrible movie.
Oh no.
And he said that taught him a lesson. And he says he should have taken the $2 million, because if people criticize him if it turned out to be a bad movie, he had the excuse of saying, look, it was $2 million. Everyone would have said, you know what? I get it. I understand. But he was in actor jail and didn't make any money.
Damn.
And see, but that's how precarious your position is on the fulcrum. You never know. You never know. And that's what's frightening.
Somebody once asked Whoopi Goldberg, why do you keep making terrible movies? She says, I don't set out to make terrible movies. Just sometimes they're terrible when we're finished with them.
Exactly. And what are you going to do? You have no control over some of the things that happen.
Right.
That's just the way it is.
But we will cover much more of this and other things the next time you're back here. And I don't know, Chris, I'm thinking October because of the fact that I think I just lost. Oh, there you are, Chris. You just flipped into a completely different position there. That's interesting. I'm thinking October would be a good time for a couple of good reasons. We'll talk about that. But I'm thinking October would be a good time to have you back, Kev. So if not beforehand, certainly that time. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, great.
All right, great.
Chris, you're good?
I'm fine, man.
Yeah. Okay.
It's been a great episode. This has been fantastic.
Okay.
Hey, look, thanks
Thank you
for
very
inviting
much,
me.
Kevin.
Yeah. Take care, Kevin, Chris, everybody.
Care.
Take care. And we'll leave some comments and contacts for your Kickstarter in the comments section below. And folks, let us know what you think of the episode. Be there. Aloha.
Okay, thank you. You guys take care. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.